Hey there, my name's Jordyn, and I'm a financial coach and financial planner. And today I'm your host at the Reimagine Wealth podcast, where we share imperfect stories about embodying our values, weaving just system level safety nets, and working to build the world that we want to live in, one where we all get to have our needs met and thrive. Let these be shared learnings that allow you to more deeply explore, experiment, and shift, and that allow us to unlock our collective knowledge. This show is ad-free and available to everyone, and it wouldn't be possible without your love and support. So if you like what you're listening to, please like, review, subscribe, and share the show with those in your community. If you're able, please support my work to produce the show by becoming a paid member of my Substack, which starts at $6 a month. Link to that and more is in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. And now let's get into the show. This is part 2 of my story. Part 1 really encompassed how I moved the money in my accounts and the wealth and class privilege that I had, as well as my money story. The rest of this is really going to be about the job change that I made and the reduction in my income. Like I shared in part 1, I was making about $150,000 a year. That was a salary that was coming from being a program manager in the technology/renewable energy sector. And I was deeply unsatisfied with my job and knew that I wanted to make a change. The thing that I kept coming back to was I wanted to have more time and energy to put towards building collective power, towards community organizing. Those were things that I was doing outside of work on my own time, and it continued to bother me that I had to spend so much of my energy at a job that was not filling my cup, was not bringing me joy, did not feel meaningful to me, and that the very limited extra time that I had, which again is also a privilege, was where I was able to do my organizing work. What I really wanted was to be able to devote more time towards building collective power, towards organizing my people, and I knew that sticking it out in my current job was not going to be the answer. I also kept coming back to this idea of I want to essentially have the energetic capacity to show up for right relationship to myself, to my beloveds, which includes family, chosen family, friends, and I want to be able to show up in right relationship with my community, which also includes the land, it includes the water, it includes animals, it includes the places that I take up space. Through that lens, I really started to explore what a different career could look like. So we're zooming out, taking a couple steps back in time. In 2023, this is before I hired Lisa Hodges to be my financial advisor, I started working with a career coach named Laura Sims. Shout out to Laura. She is awesome and runs this program called Your Career Homecoming. And through that program, I was able to really get to know myself so much better. So much of this was self-exploration and think beyond, obviously, just the how do I pay my bills, but really think about why do I want to work? What do I want to work for? What are the reasons beyond money that I want to work? And at first I was like, well, I don't want to work. Ideally, I would not be working. But when I started to think about, hey, gardening is a type of work. Basically, anything that we are doing with our energy or time could be a type of work. It doesn't mean we're getting compensated for it. Things like childcare, things like caregiving, things like cooking, things like exercising with others, things like supporting others, providing emotional support, emotional labor. All of these things could be conceived as work. We can think more broadly about what that means. Through working with Laura, I was able to get really clear on what is essentially my why, my what, my how. Why do I want to work? What type of skills and gifts do I want to bring into my work? And how do I want to work? What's the environment? What are the conditions? What's the schedule? What is the culture? All of these things I needed to think about. And what came out of that was getting really clear on I wanted to use my energetic capacity to, again, organize my people, to redistribute power, which I started to think about as in the form of wealth, power in the form of wealth. And that brought me closer to thinking about maybe finance is actually a viable path for me. I truly did not think I would find a job. I did not believe that people would pay me to help them essentially make less money. But then again, when I started to think about it differently, as these people are paying me to help them better live into their values, to help them better embody their values, and to show up as the type of person that they want to be. And so when I started thinking about it like that, I was like, right, this is so desperately needed and also very needed to move towards collective liberation, just like how white folks are the folks responsible for dismantling white supremacy. The people with wealth and class privilege are responsible for dismantling classism. The thing that made me decide to take the leap is that Resource Generation did have a financial professionals database. So I knew that there were financial folks out in the world that were actually working with people who wanted to redistribute their wealth in a just and equitable way, folks that wanted to spend down their assets. And so I was like, okay, there seems to be this like niche area. If I can figure that out, maybe there's something here. And that was how I got connected to Lisa. And Lisa said, oh, you want to do more radical financial advising? There's this community that I'm a part of called Rad Planners, and you should join. I really just attribute so much of this to Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, if you're listening to this. So I joined that community. I started to go to the monthly calls. I got plugged in, and I'm someone who, once I am excited about a group or an organization, I go all in. And so I was learning things. I was joining calls to just understand how things worked. And at the same time, I was also doing my own research on what do you need to do to even become a financial advisor? And the big takeaway was I need to at least pass the Series 65. And so I decided to go ahead and try to take that exam without really testing my theory of do I even want to do this? But it felt like a risk that I wanted to take. Good news, I passed the exam, and from there was when I really started looking for a job. And I was really, really specific and only working with folks that felt very, very aligned to me and the work that I wanted to do. I knew that I did not want to go work at a more traditional firm because that would require me to compromise my values, and I would be back in the same position as my previous jobs. The thing, though, was I knew that I would not be able to be compensated how I had been when I worked in the tech industry. No one was going to pay me $150,000 to basically be an entry-level person. And so I had to get really clear for myself on how much is enough and what do I actually need? What do I actually want? What does a well-adjusted life look like? And to me, that's a life where I'm satisfied. I'm definitely meeting my basic needs, and I'm able to do things that bring me joy. It's also a life where, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, I have the capacity to show up for myself, to show up for the people that I love, and to show up for my community. So having that energetic capacity, that time to actually be able to do those things and integrate my organizing self into my work was so important. It's not a financial return, but it's another type of return that I was willing to put higher than making a higher wage. So I started talking to people who were doing this work, doing some informational interviews, and just learning about what does this even look like. I had been interviewing at a few different places and was struggling with not meeting the qualifications for the job, or just finding that it wasn't as aligned as I wanted it to be. Then I got connected to this person named Leo Freeman, who was one of the people who co-founded Rad Planners. I had just reached out to Leo to be like, hey, I think what you're doing is really cool. I really admire you. Can we talk? It was an informational interview. I just wanted to get to know them and understand what path they went on. I had already been showing up in the Rad Planners community. I didn't know this at the time, but Leo already knew a little bit about who I was, what I was doing. They knew that I was looking for a job. It was a scheduled 45-minute conversation that I want to say turned into like a 2-hour conversation, or at least an hour and a half. And out of that, Leo was saying, hey, I just started this consulting collective. I actually really need help. Do you want to work there with me? And so it wasn't financial planning. And I was also like, wow, this opportunity to learn from Leo, to be mentored by Leo, someone who's doing some of the most transformative work that I've seen in this Rad Planners community. Like, yes, hard yes. I made that choice to go work with Leo, knowing that I would be making $25 an hour, working 32 hours a week, and not having any benefits. It would be a contract job. I would essentially be self-employed. So $25 an hour times 32 hours a week times 52 weeks in the year, that comes out to about $41,000 a year. And I had known, calculating my enough number, which is a number that's really personalized to me. So my enough number might sound really high to some of you that are listening. It might sound really low to some of you that are listening. Part of the things that influence my enough number is the fact that I don't have any dependents. I don't have anyone that I'm financially responsible for other than myself. And I have a partner where we share our expenses more equitably based on our incomes. He makes significantly more than I do now. And so that influences how much I have to spend to cover our shared expenses. It's less than if we were splitting things 50-50, for example. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. But all of this to say is that my enough number is not the enough number to strive for or to aspire to. My enough number is not your enough number, and your enough number is not somebody else's. It's really going to be influenced by a lot of systemic conditions, by our different degrees of privilege, and about whether we are caregivers or have dependents. It's really just what I needed to live into my own definition of what a well-adjusted life is for me. And so my enough number ranged anywhere between like $2,500 a month to $5,000 a month. I ended up taking the median of my monthly spending and landed on I needed to bring in about $3,000 a month to really consistently meet that well-adjusted life goal. So that's including meeting my basic needs, being able to do things that bring me joy, continuing to redistribute at least 10% of that. And it also meant that I needed to be a lot more mindful about my spending than I had in the past when I had more excess. The other contributing factor was, again, the privilege that I had through my partner. This enough number included the fact that I'm paying subsidized rent because my partner owns the home that I live in, that I'm paying subsidized shared expenses because we split our expenses based on our income distribution. So going back to how much money did I need to actually be making as I made this shift, I did the back of the envelope math. I was like, okay, $41,000 divided by $3,000 a month. Yeah, that checks out the maths. The thing that I made a big mistake on was I did not factor in self-employment tax because taxes wouldn't be getting taken out of my paycheck. Because I'd be working as a 1099 and I had never done that before. I just didn't even think about it. I didn't factor in that about 25%, somewhere between 20 and 30% of that is going to need to get paid to go towards taxes. So once I took out the 20 to 30% to account for quarterly tax payments, I was actually making less than what I needed to bring in. I was making something closer to like $2,500 a month. So I was about $500 short each month. And I still felt okay at the time because I had given myself some runway and anticipation for this. Part of the money that I divested, I set aside to account for any time period where I'm not working and can't find a job. So I had given myself some runway and was able to say, okay, I can pull from my savings to cover this amount. This is not sustainable for me, but I can still make this work. And it still felt worth it to me. It was a time where I was thinking about money so much more often than I ever had before. Even though the numbers told me I was going to be okay, I was feeling anxious, I was feeling unstable, and the reality was I did have a safety net that I could fall back on. I had my partner who, at the end of the day, even if I wasn't, quote unquote, paying my fair share, would still support me and take care of me. And that was part of the conversations that we had earlier on. And I also had parents to where if I was really down on my luck, I could go stay in their home. That's not the well-adjusted life that I'm imagining for myself, but I did have other options. And so I was able to run through, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What would I do? And in each one, even though there were scenarios where I felt more like a burden than others, I would be okay. I also did decide to set up my business, Reimagine Wealth, in parallel, and was able to take on some more contracting work. I actually joined Saltbox Financial, that's run by a close comrade, Vera Kelsey Watts. And through working with Vera, we were able to draft up an agreement that allowed me to be a contractor that does hourly financial planning. And so that allowed me to bring in more income outside of the work that I was just doing with Leo. I also started to incorporate my financial coaching work into the equation. I was certainly working a lot more than 40 hours a week. I was really stretching myself and, to be honest, extracting from myself. I wrote a Substack article about this, how I'm the extractive boss. And it was coming from a place of scarcity, a fear of, oh my gosh, I'm worried I'm not going to have enough, or I'm worried I'm going to be a burden and I'm going to have to ask for help. And that's something I had to really work through. To be honest, I'm still working through it. And now I'm much more well equipped to say that sometimes asking for help is a gift, to be able to allow someone the opportunity to help you. But I really, really had to work through this, individualism idea that we just have to make it on our own and we can't ask for help. That's deeply indoctrinated into our society and definitely lives in my body as well. It's something I'm still unlearning. So I did have to practice that. I had to practice asking for help, which was really, really uncomfortable. I had to practice talking to my partner like, hey, the reason that I'm able to contribute the same amount to our shared expenses is because I'm pulling from my savings. Are you open to, hitting pause on that until I get to a place where there's a little bit more stability? So it was both a mix of asking for help and also some things work-wise did start shifting, which allowed me to get to a place of stability. The shift was that Leo started doing some contracting work through Oberon Capital Advisors, which is a registered investment advisor, essentially a financial planning and wealth management firm that's really focused on using finance to further a just transition. Leo asked me if I wanted to help build out the Chosen Family Office platform, which is something I think you'll hear about in a future episode when I talk to Susanna. And I said, yes, let's do it. It was a vision that I was really excited about, being able to create integrated care teams of politicized, values-aligned financial teams, which I was really seeing the need for. The other reason that I was swayed to say yes is because it also came with a $10 an hour raise, which allowed me to go from making $25 an hour, working 30 hours a week, to be making $35 an hour, working 32 hours a week, and getting benefits. And that was able to get me to a point where, worst case scenario, through this now W-2 job, so I also don't have to think about the self-employment tax, through this W-2 job, I am able to consistently bring home $3,000 a month. And so that felt so supportive, so good in my body, and allowed me to shift my focus and energy, and put the amount of energy and capacity into my business that I wanted to, but in a way that didn't require me to extract from myself. So I went this really, really wonky path, this untraditional path. And I'm also so glad that I did, because I got to have so much exposure to all of these different things, but doing it with people who are so, so deeply aligned to the work that I want to be doing, and who are also challenging me to reimagine return, reimagine risk, and just what's possible, and who understand how to do something like stand up a solidarity economy investment, and who are mentoring me around integrated capital. So over the course of 2023, not only did I divest the $150,000 from Wall Street, like I talked about in part one, but I also took a little bit more than $100,000 pay cut. And it was a lot of shifts. It was a lot of changes. So much of this was really made possible both by the privilege that I was born into, my family's class ascension, and also by my partner, who was really willing to support me, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was hard. It also created fear. I don't think he is ever going to listen to these, but Derek, if you're listening to this, thank you. I so deeply appreciate and love you. And thank you for the trust that you had in me. And it was also made possible by the people who were willing to work with me. Even though I was relatively new to this field, I had a very different perspective. And I think that has helped people trust me and really believe in the work that I and those around me are doing. And now you might be wondering, wow, that was a topsy-turvy story. And Jordyn, where are you at today? So in 2024, my gross income, which is, pre-tax, pre-anything being taken out, was about $50,000. My net income was somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. I don't have the actual number in front of me right now, but it was somewhere around that. And I did reach my enough number. I am in a place where I feel much more stable, and I'm probably going to make somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 this year. And for me, I am able to live my well-adjusted life. I really believe in living in the enoughness and then giving away anything else. Because so much of this I didn't truly earn myself. I've earned through my privilege or through these systemic injustices that are baked into our society. And that really ends it. We're in February of 2025. I'm still at Oberon Capital Advisors. I'm still dual registered at Saltbox and work with a few hourly clients there. I'm making plans to fully shift all of my financial advising work into Oberon Capital Advisors. So soon there will be one home for that. There's still a few factors that are making my income this year a little bit more unpredictable. I don't know for certain that I will make as much as I made last year. There's a few things that are just not guaranteed, and so I'm leaning into that. I am living in my enoughness right now. I'm feeling good. I'm savoring that. If that shifts for whatever reason, I'm going to have to make adjustments. And because I have done this before, I've lived through a significant income change. I have really walked through a lot of different worst case scenarios and have made plans for how I will respond if a worse situation happens that's preventing me from meeting my enough number. I've started to develop trust in myself that regardless of what happens, I will figure this out. I am capable of making money. What I do has value, and what everyone does is valuable. We don't have to be productive to prove that. And also, I will be okay. I believe in myself that I will be able to be okay, whether that's through work, whether that's through asking for help, whether that's through a mix of both, and through building community to hold us in the harder times. I believe that I'm capable of building close-knit communities of care, and that's something I'm actively prioritizing now because it takes time. And just like compound interest, relationships, deepening relationships compound on each other as well and grow and deepen and cultivate trust. Investing in my relationships now is another way that I am moving towards enoughness and being less reliant on money, as well as developing self-resiliency skills and putting time and energy into learning those and sharing those with community as well. Building community such that you can actually ask someone for help, whether that's, hey, can you loan me some money? Hey, can you run this errand for me? Hey, can you help take care of me? Hey, can you drop off food? Being able to actually genuinely ask for help and receive it, and continuing to build trust to the point where we can navigate conflict, to where we can ask for what we need, to where we can set boundaries, to where we can show up for each other in right relationship. That is actually the key to becoming less reliant on money, on capitalism. And just a plug is another form of retirement planning that I'm going to be exploring in further episodes. So that's my story. What a wild ride it's been. I'm so grateful for where everything has landed, how I've evolved and changed over time, and the perspective that it's given me. Recap. For me, the cliff notes here are, I was disillusioned by what was happening in the world. I experienced intense cognitive dissonance until the point where I was moved to take action. I started to reimagine what my livelihood could look like. And then I started doing the research and all the pre-work to start moving in that direction. I trusted myself and took on a much higher degree of risk than I had before in my life. I leaned on those around me and the privilege that I had access to make that possible. And I continued to learn. I continued to practice. And that really is how I made the shift of doing transformative financial planning, completely transforming my career, but also really the act of much more deeply embodying my values into my day-to-day life. Thank you so much for listening to the Reimagine Wealth podcast. You can find resources and links from today's episode in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, review, subscribe, and share this with those in your community. If you'd like to support the show, you can become a paid member of my Substack, which allows me to sustain this work and have more episodes to share in the future. Again, links to all of that and more are in the show notes. And until next time, I'm sending you resilience and warmth, and thank you so much for tuning in.